Yeah, it's interesting. My name is David Britton, by the way. I work in our global fraud and identity group in a strategy position. I work with our product organization, but a lot of it is around strategies. And so Philip and I have had some conversations in the past around this idea of trust and identity. One of the areas that we work within Experian also includes another aspect of travel, which is the airline space. So we are working today with some of the large airlines around the world, and to this point about what types of things happen from a fraud perspective, just to give you an idea, fraud we find is sort of the best thing that the fraudsters will do on any given day. So the financial crimes that happen in a digital fraudulent environment, that's really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the nefarious activity that comes later. So for example, the funds that are earned from a scam at an airline, an e-commerce site, a banking site, a place like Airbnb, the funds that are earned there by the bad guys are now used to go fund really dangerous things. Weapons trades, human trafficking is a really big issue. The airlines, actually, that's one of the biggest things that we see. Stolen credit cards are used to purchase airline tickets, where then they'll use those tickets to traffic people around. So when we talk about the need for things like trust and identity and risk and security in this digital space, the stuff we're stopping is really sort of the very first line of defense to a whole lot of nefarious activity that happens down market, downstream. We wanted to walk a little bit through sort of how we see the future of what this identity really is going to look like, and thought we would start, if we can start with this kind of a view. We really do live in a world where it seems that the attackers have a tremendous amount of data. This is not news to anybody in the room here. We've all heard about it in the reports about data breaches that have happened. The data is gold, and they seem to have a ton of it. We wake up every morning assuming that everyone's identity has already been compromised. Not just the 100 million you hear about in the news. The latest reports show that since 2013, there have been over 9 billion consumer records compromised. Now, immediately used to say, well, there's not that many people on the planet, and you'd be right. The issue is that the same person's identity has been compromised multiple times. 9.1 billion records since 2013. We're now starting to see this, this high-scale technological advancement where the fraudsters are becoming data aggregators, much like what Experian has been historically. They're stealing email addresses from this source, card and payment details from another source, and now there are services that will actually aggregate that data on behalf of other paying fraudsters. It's always interesting to see on the underground how the fraudsters are transacting, because they don't use credit cards. They used to use e-gold, and now a lot of it's going to Bitcoin, or one of the very popular methods of transaction is actually airline miles and points. So we recently, a couple of years back, we saw that there was a ring that was offering malware for hire in exchange for airline points. So very interesting things that are going on. Just to give you some statistics, one of the most telling ones are interesting. Yeah, go ahead, quick question. Yeah, sure.
You know, if I call Amex or Citi, we use these cards a lot, do a lot of purchases on them. Obviously, sometimes they'll get flagged if something looks suspicious, even though we do a lot of advertising dollars there and stuff. But it makes me think, occasionally I'll call in and it will ask, even if I've had them ask over the phone and more so online, to put in your social security number from a legitimate source, but it makes me very nervous for obvious reasons to do that.
Right.
I don't care if Amex is asking or anything else. And they have to realize that people don't really want, because the site may show that it's Amex, but is it somebody that's cloning the Amex site? Maybe it's not Amex, and they're cloning keystrokes or whatever the hell they're doing. Even if it doesn't show up, you know, it's hidden. That's the kind of stuff that freaks me out.
Yeah,
So
and you're
thinking from that's got to be. I can't be the only one that thinks that way.
You're right, and I think that it's really interesting you mentioned that. Experian today just released our global fraud report. And some of the findings, we surveyed over 5,500 consumers around the globe, and then about 500 businesses were surveyed as well. It's available, I think, online at this point. It just was released today, I think. But interesting to find out what some of the consumer perceptions are about risk and security, where there's now a desire for a physical or a visible aspect of security when they're interacting. So we've been in the industry trying to figure out how do we reduce the friction to get better, more people through the door. And now we're hearing consumers saying, no, I actually want some visible means of security. Now, the truth is that the things that are in place today from a security perspective haven't been working. So there are a lot of visible things that are supposed to be secure. There's one-time passcodes that you'll get sent. There's the little picture on the login page. That one just drives me nuts. There's a lot of friction that's been introduced that has absolutely done nothing to really solve the fraud problem, which is why we believe, and this is something Philip mentioned, we'll talk about it again here, a new way of looking at identity and a new way of authenticating users has to come to the fore. And we feel that the way to do that is to look beyond the traditional data sets, beyond the traditional static lookup of an identity verification, whether that's for a business or for a consumer, and start to see what other data is available that we can pull together in meaningful ways to achieve two things. Give the consumer that sense of security while also actually protecting both the consumer and the business in the process. But that is the challenge that we're facing today. And I think as you're a more savvy consumer than most who would simply happily just give away their social security number for a cup of coffee. I mean, there are studies that indicate that. There was a test that was done on the streets in London and they said, would you give away your identity number for a cup of coffee? And they said, yeah, if it's Starbucks, something like that. So the point is, though, that one of the bigger things, we saw last year that the amount of mobile traffic in banking, for example, exceeded 50%. So more than half the traffic of consumers in banking is being done on a phone. Interesting to note that more than 61% of that traffic is fraudulent, or fraudulent attempts. So 61 attempts of all fraud came from a mobile device in 2016, and that's growing. Why? Well, if you look at the number sort of right in the middle, the 8x number, mobile platforms, meaning your mobile channel, is a much richer target for the fraudsters than the traditional web infrastructure. So if you go through a browser, you're not going to have, the business is not going to see as much fraudulent attack activity as they are through the mobile channel. The reason for that is when mobile became a thing, we saw that a lot of the businesses were so eager to get into the mobile enablement space that they outsourced the development of all of their mobile platforms to third parties, right? In doing so, the legacy of risk management experience and the processes that had been built up for the web presence were never ported over to mobile. So now there's this reaction to try to catch up on that, and so there are some businesses that have done this well. They've actually said, no, we're proactively going to bake security into our mobile process, but the end result has been that fraudsters will always go to the weakest link in the chain, and at this point it's the mobile platforms with a higher attack rate than what we've normally seen. Couple of other statistics here. As a general rule of thumb, 20 legitimate customers' experience is being interrupted for every fraudster. It's a 20-to-1 false positive ratio today. That's actually better than it used to be. In e-commerce, it used to be as high as 25 or 30% of your traffic to catch a single fraudster. That meant they were either denied a transaction, it meant their product was held up before it was shipped out, they had to call and verify things. That's a massive amount of top-end revenue that's being blocked immediately, oftentimes by the same security mechanisms that are supposed to help the business. So there was this whole movement that said, are we spending more in lost opportunity on the fraud solutions than we're actually saving in terms of fraud? Why not just turn off all the fraud solutions? We'll make more money. So that was a big thing that we had to, the industry is having to wrestle with. More than 1 in 10 applications is actually possibly using fraudulent data, stolen data. 1 in 10, whether that's a credit card application, a business application, any enrollment online that you can imagine, because of the amount of data that's been compromised. And fraud losses over 24 billion or so in 2016, with a growth rate of 13% year over year on commerce specifically. Yeah. Is there a question?
Has the 8x actually dropped over the last 2 years, or is that at its height?
No, the 8x unfortunately continues to rise. So we don't have the latest numbers, but the early tells are showing us that this is, because of the popularity of the platforms, we're seeing that that number is continuing to rise. Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the bad guys, so to speak,
yeah,
they go compromise all this data.
Yeah.
They sit out here in the fringe, or in the fringes, and they sell this data off at whatever price they can get through Bitcoin or any of these cryptocurrencies that really can't be tracked. And
right.
then this person that buys it knows what they're buying. They know they're buying you know, and then they're gonna go, which is why I was surprised that you're saying that over 10% of all applications are fraudulent.
That's correct.
So obviously, this is it's a huge racket. They know what it is, and they're like, hey, we'll go. I don't know if they have I have no idea how sophisticated it can get. I'm assuming they're pretty sophisticated.
That's right.
The idea is, hey, we're going to go throw all this crap against the wall, knowing that a little bit of it is going to get through it.
That is exactly right. And so to break down that into a number of things, first of all, the ecosystem of the fraudulent enterprise has gotten very, very complex. We didn't put it in this one, but we have it. We can share it with you. There's sort of a life cycle of how the fraud is happening today. It starts with things like malware being introduced into a device, a phishing attack which compromises someone's credentials. Usually it's a spear phishing attack aimed at a CFO, right? Where they know who he is, they've got his LinkedIn credentials, and they're going to say, hey, this is from somebody he's connected to. They'll spoof an email and send it in. That may actually introduce malware onto his machine. When they go and log in, the malware now captures the credentials. Once the credentials are captured, they'll make an ingress into the environment. They'll move laterally into a sensitive area where they may have access to records. We saw this at the Target breach many years ago. That started because the AC vendor, the heating and air conditioning vendor for Target, had an unsecured system that was somehow connected to the Target main POS terminal network. Lateral movement got them in to be able to start to pilfer the data. Now you go, you say, well, I've collected it all. Really hard to stop the collection of the data. That's happening regularly. Now they're marketing it, they're selling it to their underground constituents on things like Silk Road and these other underground websites on the dark web. Now when they go, there's another group that will go and execute and test those credentials. Let's say I've got 100,000 logins to some large bank account, some large bank, whether that's a commercial banking environment or a consumer banking. They'll go through and test those credentials. The things that Philip was talking about, the ability to see that, hey, why am I suddenly getting 100 login attempts across 100 different accounts from a single device, or a device that's not configured to be the device that belongs there, is the type of detail that we're looking at, frankly. Now it's a matter of moving money, setting up mule accounts and so on, but the chain continues. That's exactly right. That's part of the challenge. Yeah, Philip.
And if we look at 24 billion, growing at 13%,
Yeah.
I would say in the last 3 to 5 years, these groups, it's not somebody in a basement. It's not that hacker
No, that's right.
with gloves on the
This is
street.
just sophisticated operation.
Operations, right? We have an example of the Chinese market where they are so sophisticated that they go into town, let's say Beijing or Shanghai, they go 50 miles out, and they set up shop. Just like in a hotel, just at the town square, they set up a shop and say, hey, we can get you guys jobs in the city. You come into tent,
Yep.
you do your resume on the computer. As you're doing your resume, they're filming you. And then the last step is, oh, let's take a picture of your ID so we can make sure that you're in good standing with the government. Now they have the way to crack our system because they have the ID and they have the liveness. Because as you're typing, your face is moving, you're blinking, you're doing all these things. Because the return is so amazing now, these folks are just getting, I believe they're getting more and more and more
That's right.
organized.
Yeah.
And so sophisticated that a lot of times, anything you put out, any defense you put out, you better look at in the next week or two to see where the holes are and start plugging them right away because they are so good at their jobs. That is just scary.
Yeah, didn't I read recently, was it North Korea and the governments where they actually go in and, for lack of a better term, kind of holding companies hostage for significant payments or they're going to shut them down? I mean, so this is
Yeah.
like a part of their business model.
That's right. There are the evolution. I mean, there's a whole. We could get into a whole topic there, but the evolution of fraud into what we now see as cyber terrorism or state-sponsored activities. Yeah, the state-sponsored piece is very, very challenging, frankly, because there's a lot of money and energy behind it, and great organization around it as well. Just to walk through some of these things. So if you look at this as this increasing chess game at an accelerated pace where measures come into place, countermeasures have to be put into place, attacks change, we have to change defenses. We've come down to this idea that says, listen, fundamentally, rather than looking just at the activity, which was the traditional way of stopping fraud, you'd look at a wire transfer and say, that doesn't look good to me. if you can get down to understanding who the individual or the business is on the other end of the wire, you're going to stand a better chance. And so we say if we can recognize the person better, that sets us at a better precedent to be able to stop the fraud. So just to give you a sense of what we mean by this in the digital space, right? These are a number of types of devices, and yes, that's a refrigerator over there. We've been detecting activities from refrigerators for some time. We call them the man in the freezer attacks, but that's just between us. We've developed methods to look at either browser-based activities or in-app web-based activities that are coming through the phone as well. Now it's the next generation, the Internet of Things, the connected phone, thermostat, etc. How do we start to look at the activities there that are connecting through these very diverse protocols? If we can start to marry this intelligence to the identity information, the consumer's digital footprint is really changing. So this need to recognize people, businesses, and their proxies, you start to equate these two. You start to be able to say, no, David carries his phone in his pocket a certain way. It bounces a certain way when he walks. There's biometric readouts that can actually help us with that, right? There's a lot of data that's out there that's part of what we call the digital exhaust that we're all leaving behind, whether it's our social media footprint or other things that can help us with these new generation of an ID. So how do we go about it? Well, just to give you an idea, there's always been this idea around the bureau, right? That's what Experian has been for many, many years. We have addresses, names, social security numbers, dates of birth. In the business side, we have business intelligence around who a business is from a data perspective. Great and essential, but it's not sufficient, right? Then there was the device. In 2013, Experian acquired a company called the 41st Parameter, which had invented a lot of this device recognition technology. It was a company that I came through actually to come into Experian. We had been working with the big banks and merchants in the online space for a long time, figured out how to look at device intelligence to marry it together. But now there are these new emerging data sources. All your transactional history from shopping carts. There's your social media footprint. There's your biometrics data that's available somewhere when you're doing a Touch ID. There's email history. Philip mentioned email origins. There are businesses out there that are specializing in gathering and assessing a lot of this data. Our thought and our philosophy is that we can start to look at all of this data, merge it together with the right intelligence on top of it to really come to a single point. Now the problem is on their own, today, you get a fragmented view of the customer or the business, right? Each of these identifiers by its own specialized provider is meaningless without understanding everything else about that consumer in a single view. So our intention is that by pulling this together, we can start to build out a very clear identity of either a consumer or a business by leveraging that. Now, on the business side, we're talking a lot about consumers, but there is this understanding that in the digital world, a representative for a business, someone who is acting as a proxy for a business, is still a person that may be logging in to a corporate environment from their device or devices. So this idea that we're starting to blur the lines between how we recognize consumers and how we recognize businesses has to come to the fore. And that's where we're doing a lot of work collaborating with the business folks within Experian on the BIS side, global fraud and identity side, marketing services side. There's a lot of initiatives that are going on right now to figure out how do we aggregate this insights in a much more meaningful way. We also think that if you look at the consumer's activities across the landscape of how they interact, whether they're just coming in from a marketing experience perspective, there's intelligence to be gathered there. If we then can tether that to them coming on board and registering for a service, enrolling into a service, setting up new accounts, and then there's the ongoing login authentication piece. You start to say, if I can have that comprehensive view of that consumer or that business owner across the portfolio of activities, now we have a really customer-centric view, which helps on two things. It helps us understand the customer for both fraud purposes and risk prevention purposes, but it also helps us customize experiences for them and allows the consumer or the person interacting to have a very sound sense and a safe sense as they interact with their trusted business partners. Get this wheel to look. The way we're pulling it together, there is some new technology that we've developed over the last year, which is called our cross-core platform. And what it basically allows us to do, take in data And then on the back side of that, we can connect to a lot of those service providers that are doing social media identification, behavioral identification, biometrics information and intelligence. We have a platform now that allows us to become a single source to be able to go and allow a business to have access to any one of those partners on the back side, on the back end. And that's actually something that has an adaptive decisioning layer, so that as a consumer, as a business goes through the process within your organization, there's a way for us to tether that together. Okay. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to build this out, but ultimately, as we look to the future, we believe that as a business owner, a consumer comes in and interacts with many of these different constituents, right? They may have relationships with a merchant, an airline, a bank, a credit card company, a health insurance provider, all of these groups, but they may not have a relationship with your business specifically. They may be unknown to you. Experian as a provider actually serves these multi-market vertical industries and can have a somewhat common view of that person over time. And that allows us to start to say, even though it's the first time you've seen that person yourself, they may have been seen somewhere in the collective and you could onboard them seamlessly, that kind of a thing. All right, it was a sort of a whirlwind. Yes, Teresa, yeah.
This is more of a high-tech event.
Sure.
Two of our large high-tech accounts that are up in Washington.
Yeah.
They basically have a lot of registration coming online to represent themselves as a business.
That's right.
On an online registration when they're not. So with e-commerce and with high tech, that business registration can be difficult. And what have been some of your observations when it comes to those registration sites?
Yeah, well, the first thing is to note that the online registration is where we're seeing one of the biggest attack rates, first of all. So that 10-to-1 applications is not just for like credit cards. This is any online account. There is this increasing growth in the activity there, and that's because the data to register, to set up something is actually very prevalent in the market today. The other thing is that there have been some pressures in the market of late where things like transactional counterfeit card fraud, as an example, has been depressed. Counterfeit numbers are down because in 2015 we all rolled out a chip and signature approach. Well, that fraudster didn't stop being a fraudster and go get a real job. They moved their energies upstream to signing up for a new card, because now I can control the whole card. I don't have to go steal some counterfeit card, right? On the registration side, though, we're seeing that there is actually an increase in the attack rate. It's moved upstream, and now it's a matter of saying, okay, well, what information can I bring to bear that allows me as a business to make a better decision about that partner that wants to come on board? The business information, the intelligence information may check out. It may show up as legitimate. There is actually a building with that address and all of these types of traditional things. Why is it that that particular application and 17 others in the last hour all came from the same or similarly configured devices? We see cyber cafes in Turkey where it's not the same computer. So your device ID is going to look different. There may be 14 devices that are all communicating or working in concert off of a list of 1,000 identities. That's the challenge that we're able to overcome now. And we see it immediately. We say, show me everything where the device was configured in Turkish, this Windows operating system, and this version of address book. You can start to narrow your focus down and automate that through both the intelligence logic and the decisioning. And then if need be, let's go look up through one of our partners what the behavior was when they were navigating on the site. How did they click through? Did they copy paste a lot of data? Because that's indicative of fraud. Did they alt tab on their keyboard or not? Yeah.
Question. We actually have a client that just came on that is advertising VPNs.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm curious.
Philip is chuckling already. And what is the name of this client?
Is it NordVPN, the ones that make the commercials on TV? The guys at a Starbucks? Is like, you got to use
No,
VPN.
they came in, they're doing, we just started with radio, doing like the Mr. Anderson, they kind of played off of that.
Yeah.
Mr. Anderson, The Matrix.
Sure.
So they're kind of going after a conservative audience.
Sure.
The people don't trust the government, don't want anyone seeing what I'm doing. But I'm curious what percentage of people are legit, like, hey, I want a VPN because I don't want people coming in and hacking in and getting my information, compared to I'm going to assume that every bad guy
That's right.
uses a VPN because they want anonymity.
I'll tell you.
So-
So in 1998, I started doing online fraud detection in 1997. Yes, there was an internet back in 1997, and I was there.
I was there too.
There was the www at the time was like Wild Wild West. But 1997, we thought we can use the IP address to start to look at fraud. By 1998, we saw the first spoofed IP address, and we were like, back to the drawing board. And that's what led to a lot of the device intelligence beyond network, because an IP address is a network setting. It's not the device setting, right? So the percentage of people that do it is actually much higher than you'd think. By the way, the new version of that is not just IP spoofing or using private networks. It's now emulators. I can download software that makes my laptop look like an iPhone. That's an emulator. And there are legitimate usages for people that are wanting to test. If they're building an app for iPhone, they don't want to have to go buy every phone to test if their product works. So they'll use emulators to say, make it look like an Android, make it look like an iPhone. The fraudsters will also use this. On its own, you'd think that would be a really great tell that the fraudsters are using it all day long. The problem is the false positive rate is much too high. So the perspective then is, okay, great, that is a signal. That is an identifier, but on its own, it's way too fraught with false positives. And so you start to have to build in a very intelligent layer of decisioning based on a wide variety, hundreds of attributes, that when pulled together, you'll start to say, if there's an emulator and the device configuration is some foreign language for the identity data, and by the way, there's been a velocity of activity over time, and the person doing it is doing a copy-paste, and the email associated with it has only been around for 6 hours. Now you start to go, that's suspicious. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just reading an article in the Wall Street Journal last week, and it was this long article about the robocalls now and the spoofing of phone numbers so it looks like it's local. Like I've got a 310 number that I've had since 2001, so every time I see a 310, more likely than not, if I don't know who it is, okay, it's just, but they were basically showing where they brought the guy in, the guy was right here in South Orange County, brought him to DC and everything else. You know, the do not call lists are a joke. They literally are a joke. They'll sit there and robocall it because they know that there's grandpas and grandmas and a lot of other people that will sit and pick this stuff up, and they're like, it's too lucrative to stop.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy. They were saying, like, how do you stop it? How do you stop the robocalls coming in? So I agree with you in the fact that the telemarketers were all like, oh, you can't do this, it's going to kill our industry. Well, it didn't kill the industry.
No.
It just moved upstream, like you said, to the point where now it's actually even more lucrative because we don't have actual live people making these calls. They're just all dialers.
I think that
it's crazy.
the big takeaway is that, you know, the positive side of this is that I think that we're only scratching the surface of how accurate we're going to be able to be. We're really now just understanding what all of the data is that's going to be available to us to improve this as we go forward. That will make it very difficult for the fraudsters. And it is an ongoing chess game. We'll never have, there is no silver bullet. You'll hear that at every conference you ever go to. There's no silver bullet for fraud prevention. But the truth is that we believe that given the right philosophical approach to risk management, which also means consumer enablement, right? Those are two sides of the same coin. We think that there's a way forward on that, and that's really what we're hoping to show you here. Much of what we're talking about here is aspirational, but much of it is already in place. Our device recognition logic around how to blend offline and online data is already starting. Some of this later stuff where we can start to pinpoint it across all of our industries is aspirational for Experian, but there is energy and efforts underway under that. And with that, I'd love to bring up Lee. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I would say that as much as the fraudsters are getting organized better and better, having partners like Experian, it helps you bridge your competitors.
Okay.
That's right.
Because we're all fighting fraud, right? That has finally clicked with people. We're not competing for fraudsters, right? We're competing for the good customers.
Right.
So sharing data is getting much better. People are talking. There is gatherings of professionals that are talking about, what are you seeing? What is your problem? Oh, well, we got this thing here. Having a partnership with a company like this greases those wheels a lot easier, because you can make the introduction to the right person at the other company, and it's just, as they are getting organized, we're getting organized as well. So I feel like that's going to be a big benefit in the next couple of years.
Here's a question I have for you, because I'm not a techie, but you know, the whole cryptocurrency and all this kind of stuff, the one reoccurring thing you keep hearing about that's good is blockchain, right? there's a lot of different applications to it and everything else, and I don't know that much about it. I'm probably just like the average person who doesn't know that much about it, but is there any relevant applications to blockchain from a security standpoint?
Yeah. The answer is the short answer is yes, there is. However, the caveat is the chain itself, which is a distributed ledger system, like the blockchain itself, is really only as good as the data that's in it. Right? So unless you can validate, and the place where people think it can be used, certainly for transactions and making the efficacy on transactions, but there is talk about using it for identity. Can I store the identity into a blockchain ecosystem of some sort? That way it's intact. The challenge is, who's going to verify that it's the right identity even getting in the first place? Which, by the way, we're seeing now in the industry around what we call synthetic identities that have been created. And that's a real problem that the card industry is having to contend with in the banking industry. And Experian has a lot of solutions. Just this last year we rolled out around synthetic identity. But I think, yes, the technology has a place, but I think it's being oversold in terms of its capabilities, where I think there's a right-sized fit for it at some point. I'd like to bring Lee up. Lee works within the BIS side on product and fraud, and give you some time. I don't know if I have any slides or not.
Hey everyone, so yeah, as David mentioned, my name is Lee. I work in our product management organization for our business side of things. You know, you've heard now quite a bit from Philip and now David really on the digital identity, right? The digital footprint and how to counteract the more sophisticated fraudsters. And I want to mention right now too also the traditional data is still very valuable in terms of providing a layer of prevention, especially around fraud, especially in an environment where you're thinking in a business side where you're trying to vet out vendors and suppliers. And a lot of those times you don't have online applications created for that process, right? Doesn't mean you don't do those checks still to ensure that the supplier, or in a lot of cases maybe a data broker trying to provide information to your company. And a lot of times, right, they provide that information, maybe you find out it's not the best information and you want to go back and speak with them and they're gone. They've taken your money and you have no way of reaching them. And you know, what if you had information beforehand to help understand more about the type of business they're in, how long they've been in business, right, who the owners are. So that's where the traditional data set and where we could help today, especially when you have no fraud protection available right now. So just going through us, Experian, BIS, understanding, hey, if this business has the right information according to within our database, why trust us, right? We're going out, our business information is an aggregator of multitudes of thousands of different contributions of data. So we always try to deliver the best roll-up data of that business, the best representation of that data within that business. And we'll tell you, for example, who the business owners are, who they potentially may be in relationship with, are they potentially active supplier for our US government, for example. See, these are all the different trust indicators you can still rely on us for as a first layer or the first step in terms of your fraud strategy, and then moving later on to the more sophistication that David and Philip mentioned, where we're looking at more of the digital footprint as the digital identity, right? Other indicators around devices. Just the goal is to combine all of these things, traditional and the new frontier, to have a multi-layer approach to counteracting fraud, essentially.